Hello and welcome to Who Are You? What Do You Do? My guest this episode is Pasa Mustafa, creative director at Gunpowder and Sky, a storyteller of the digital age. When he's not working to understand the benefits of laziness, fashionably known as innovation, we cover opportunities of redundancy, the excitement of the abyss, and how Jurassic Park contains lessons for life. Enjoy episode 5. Hi everybody and welcome to another edition of Who Are You and What Do You Do? Today my guest is Pasa Mustafa. Hello Pasa.
Hi there, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm all good. It's
Good.
sunny morning. So
It
perfect.
is. And allegedly, according to the experts, it's going to continue for a couple more weeks.
Exactly.
So there you go. So welcome to Who Are You and What Do You Do? Let's just dive right in. So effectively, the first question is who are you and how would you define that?
I am Pasa Mustafa, as you said.
Mm-hmm.
Who am I professionally?
Yeah, sure.
Or personally?
Well, I'm happy.
Or
I mean,
both.
this is always one of those questions that semi throws people right from the off. So I don't know whether or not that's something that I need to define more, or whether or not I like to be that open for people to interpret.
I kind of like it open, so
okay.
I'll try and answer it.
Sure. Whichever comes most naturally, I guess, for you. I mean, I guess effectively, this is about, what you do as I guess, as a human being. And then on top of that, as your day job, and in the industry that you do.
Yeah. So I'd say from a top level, ultimately, I'm somebody who's interested in innovation and excited by it, actually. And I think that's a really top level view.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe when you hear the word innovation, you think technology and things like that. But I think it's not just technology that can be innovative. So I'm excited by innovation in the sort of human sphere, if you like, in the kind of social sphere of humans. So any sort of innovation in that area excites me as a person. That's who I am. That embodies me. That's what drives me every morning and
mm-hmm.
gets me excited and makes me want to do things rather than not do anything at all. And professionally, I manifest that at the moment in a way that is built in a particular industry, so in the media industry, and particularly in the kind of film and TV industry.
Awesome, cool. And
that's
that's probably one of the most profound and succinct responses that I've had thus far.
Okay.
I'm quite blown away by the fact that you're able to kind of get to the nub, as it were, of like who you. It's almost like you were prepared, which you weren't. So
I wasn't at all.
So that shows that you really do really have managed to define yourself in such a wonderful way.
Yeah, well, I think it's something that I'm as surprised as you are, really, that fell out so easily. But it's not something that it's something you think about a lot, I suppose, or it's something I think about a lot, and always trying to define, to try and work out how to best use your time and why you're here and what are the most important things for you to be doing. And I mean, there's a very deep philosophical angle on all those things, but in short, you need to translate it into kind of like what kind of impact you can have right now.
Yeah.
So I guess that's what I'm trying to do.
Cool. And that kind of leads into the next question, really. I guess what has been your journey and or your story to where you are today, doing what you do?
Yeah, it's one actually. I sort of tell this a few times to people because it's not as linear as maybe systems and school and parents sort of explain it to be. And I guess that's something everyone figures out as they move along their journey. But I was kind of into computing really when I grew up, and I was sort of lucky that I was had access to a computer in the mid '80s, and I guess not many people even way into the '90s. But and not that we came from a a rich family or anything at all by any means, but like more that my dad probably encouraged it, and he was into maths and that sort of side of things. So that really was the kind of eye opener into that space. So it did, my sort of love for innovation came through technology, definitely, and the ability of what you were able to sort of deliver. And then I guess the short sort of version of this is that, back then the route really was that you would become a programmer, I guess. That was sort of the thing to do, whether that was in games or design or any other areas. But it was still a sort of fairly bleak like concept, because it meant, back then it meant sitting in front of a blue screen and typing code into a machine all day, and also probably working with other people who were much more proficient than you in a sort of mathematical sense, but maybe didn't have some of the sort of social skills or social kind of experiences that I craved as well. And actually, what happened, I guess, is where sort of technology and media really started to fuse in the 90s. You had interactive CD-ROMs, and the CD, for example, gave you kind of access to bigger sort of visual media. And then interactive CDs and all those sorts of things that came with it. Then the internet, flash, design, animation, and suddenly this sort of technological bit that you were interested in didn't have to be just kind of flat and numbers based. It could sort of be a bit more visual. And that's what kind of drew me down that path, really. The idea that I could combine both of those things and not be stuck behind a screen all day, but be in that industry was quite interesting to me.
Okay, cool. So having that kind of driver to be like, I'm interested in innovation, but I'm also interested in this social aspect of innovation. So sort of having that background in, I guess, computing and maths, and somewhere in there physics, I'm sure. Where did you go with that? So you knew that you were interested in computing, but you didn't want to be sort of an almost office drone just sitting there typing away, working on sort of programming and using a stereotype, basically just having no social and not being able to communicate with anyone unless it was in zeros and ones.
And by the way, that two things about that is, one, that's not a problem if people want to and are like that. I think that's great. And two, that's not something I don't like, but it's something I just realized I needed was more kind of interaction on a different kind of level, I suppose.
So more of
I think it was
social interaction.
And I think it was a fear that people going into IT and that sort of world was a little bit inclusive and sort of didn't look out so much. And actually, you speak to a lot of people now. My brother's in that sort of space, and sometimes he craves sort of more interaction with people. But it's not that that's a problem. I just didn't feel like it was something I needed a slightly different angle. And I guess, when I was leaving school at GCSE time, 95, 96, the internet was just blowing up. And obviously that sort of gave way to a whole new path of things, And I remember actually it was in our school, and someone in their IT GCSE or whatever it was back then they built a web page, and I think everyone laughed at them. They were like, what the hell is that? They were like, this doesn't even do anything. It's just like words on a page, and you click a button and it links to another word with more pages. We're doing actual coding here, programming, rather than just clicking between pages. So and that was that would have been 96 basically. So
wow.
And then of course a year later the whole thing had changed really, and we'd kind of propelled into that new age. And so I was also quite lucky back then that I'd a sort of family member of ours had got a job in a local typesetting company, and I didn't know what a typesetting company was, really never even heard of that. But at 15, I was sort of actually I was doing a part-time job in Tesco, and I remember I saw you in there because it was around the corner from your old neck of the woods.
Oh wow. I don't remember that, but that's
I remember that.
Good memory, dude.
I was there for 3 months on checkout, and I remember I served you once, and we were like, "Hey, how's it going?" And it was a really short period I was there because I got offered this other job, and it was more money, and it was more sociable hours, closer to home. And it was at this typesetting company, and my sole job was to scan artwork that would then be included in textbooks, like kind of degree level or MBA level textbooks.
Right.
So it was all kind of graphs and very kind of detailed, not sort of visually stimulating stuff always, but usually sort of black and white graphs and things. But I used Photoshop, and it was the first time I'd used it. It was Photoshop 3, I think, back in the day. And there I was sort of 14, 15-year-old kind of getting trained on how to use Photoshop. And I'd never really had that experience before. And so it got me into the kind of more visual side of graphics and computing and technology. And that actually, there was this kind of other angle to it. And it sort of propelled me to, after my A-levels, to take a different type of course than I probably would have done 2 years before. So, instead of doing a degree in IT, which was probably the only sort of route that you had through into kind of the technical world, really.
Yeah.
They just started launching a course which was called digital imaging.
Right.
And yeah, it was a sort of brand new thing. I think it just started that year or the year before. And yeah, I think they did it in 2 places. One was in South London and the other was in Scotland. So I decided to, I lived in South London, so I thought it would be easy to do that there. Yeah. And yeah, that course involved different things like studying silver-based photography, but then also studying things like Photoshop and Dreamweaver and Flash and building web pages, encryption, and all these sorts of other things that were kind of a bit more tangible than just IT or computing. Right. They sort of felt like they had more real world uses. And I guess that was the other thing for me was that, I was slightly anti-education in the sense that it never really had excited me and got me going. And I did it, and I sort of did it fairly well. Like I did it competently. Yeah. I never really tried that hard because I didn't have that drive really for it. Exams were just not my thing. Yeah. I was itching to get out into the real world, And the idea of sort of spending too long not doing that was really, I was kind of bored of it by 15, really. I was ready to get out. So the idea of staying in it until I was like in my 20s. Yeah. Yeah, was grating on me.
Right. Yeah. I hate this, so I'm going to keep doing it. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was kind of the way that people lived, They just did things that they hated because they felt like there wasn't really any other option. Yeah. And actually, that was the thing about this digital imaging course, was that it was an HND. And of course, an HND is sort of technically, they call it a half a degree or something. But I mean, the reality is, the practicality is that people were snobby about that sort of stuff. So it wasn't half a degree, you couldn't sort of sell yourself on that. Yeah. But you could top it up. It was 2 years and you could do another year and you would get the degree. Right. So, but you had to do the HND first. So great. So did that. And then a few people sort of decided to top up the extra year. And I just thought, nah, I can't do it. Like, I'm totally done now. I realize it's only one more year to get that kind of notch on the belt, so to speak. But I just had to get out there.
So you just decided at that point, you're like, you know what, I've done enough kind of traditional education, and I need to now step into the real world, into the work.
Exactly. And I think the thing, with the HNDs is that they were a little bit more practical anyway. Yeah. So you were doing stuff already, and you were itching to sort of get out there. And a few of my friends had bands. You were in a band. Lots of people were in bands and things. So I kind of tried to help them with a bit of artwork and building a website, and sort of, is there things I can actually be doing out there in the real world? Yeah. Capitalizing on the fact that it was quite a new industry and it was a bit Wild West out there. And spending another year in education meant that was another year you weren't building up those contacts and that network and that experience. Yeah. Which I think, by today's standards is a very valid way of looking at it. And I think I was in that sort of transition period, in the 90s. I think there was a lot of that happening. And some people who stayed in education much longer or took a gap year in between and then went back to do that extra year, but then they were doing it a year later. I think, they really suffered sometimes because the market was moved on a little bit more, and particularly in a sort of skill set industry like this, which moves so quickly, you're sort of out of date already before you've gone back out to work. So
right. Sorry, I was just going to say that. So that's really interesting then, that you were almost compelled to jump at that point. and in the industry that you're going into, you were probably sort of at that curve, at the point of the curvature, sort of getting to at the top.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, jumping forward a little bit, but
Mm-hmm.
but just using that as an example, in the TV industry, it's there's you don't get trained for the specific TV job you're doing. Like, you can be a producer on a TV show over here
Mm-hmm.
and a producer on a TV show like all the way over there, and those are two completely different jobs.
Right.
If you're producing a wildlife documentary, that guy is going to be skilled in so many other things than, say, someone who's producing a reality show over here.
Yeah.
They're two very valid sort of things, and they require a certain skill set and learnings. And I think that was the thing about this going into this industry, was that really you need the hands-on experience. There's only so much you can do in education around it, and intelligize it, and sort of I'm stumbling over my words in the morning. But intellectualize it was the word I was looking for.
Okay. Yeah.
There you go.
I like intelligize it though. It's
intelligize it.
I must admit, I've been known on this podcast to create words. So I feel like we're the Shakespeares of the new generation.
Yeah, I do actually have a habit of creating words. So,
good.
Yeah, I should have stayed in school longer, shouldn't I?
That goes for me too. I stayed in school and went, and I still make up words. So I don't think that's.
There you go.
Yeah. So just to come back then, so you effectively, you were like at the end of your kind of HND, which would have been sort of mid university almost.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
You decided enough was enough. You'd got your last qualification. I'm going out into the real world. I want to get real life exposure and start working in this industry that I've been sort of training for and had some experience.
Yes, exactly.
Right. So what?
Yeah, that's it. And so that was kind of so that was happening sort of like around the late 90s, I guess. So I guess it was around 2000 when I probably came out.
Mm-hmm.
And I just applied for a bunch of jobs, that you do because you think you can do everything, and you get excited about the back pages of the Media Guardian on the Monday, for those media jobs. And I just hammered it, and I ended up working at this going as a production assistant for an internet company,
right? Okay.
iCollector.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't know anything about them. But it was in that early days of first .com boom. So there was a few of these sort of people around. And obviously eBay was just taking off. So we sort of had this sense of understanding about auctions and online auctions. And iCollector was essentially it was an auction catalog site for traditional auction houses.
Right.
And they basically put people like Sotheby's and Christie's and all those sort of Bonhams and stuff like that, selling artwork and old junk and stuff.
Yeah,
and they would take their auction catalogs and input them into their website, basically. So you could search on any auction happening over in the upcoming 6 months, and you could place a pre-sale bid through the auction site.
Mm-hmm.
And then that would mean that actually when they came to the auction, whether it was somewhere in Spain or wherever in the world, they could receive a bid from anywhere else in the world. It was that first sort of opening up of being able to do that. So suddenly there's a piece of artwork that you've been chasing for years, and it's on a sale in an auction in the middle of a little village in France or something,
mm-hmm.
and you could be there virtually. And it was a sort of fairly mundane job, and our job was to process the auction catalogs and take all the data in and clean up the images and get them all up on the site in time for the auction. And so, I was there for like 7 months, learned a lot about that first role and on all those internet companies, and hated some of the people, loved some of the people, and it was made redundant because, it was the internet. And I think I was just there for 7 months, and they offered voluntary redundancy.
Mm-hmm.
And basically what happened is two things sort of like collided in my life. And it was coming up around summer, and I just dropped a line into my old media lecturer from college.
Right.
And he was a young guy who had been teaching us whilst also studying an MBA in script writing.
Oh, okay.
And I think he was 21 when he was teaching us. We were 18.
Mm.
So, I dropped him a line and said, what are you up to? anything I can help you out on? And he had moved to a company called Flex Tech,
Mm-hmm.
which on Great Portland Street in London, and they are now called Virgin Media, and they owned all those sort of channels like Bravo and Trouble and UK TV and all those sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, he was about to start a show which was like described as a teen Big Brother. So sort of, and Big Brother had only been on 1 year at this point.
Right.
And he said, "Yeah, it's up in Scotland for a month. I can't pay you that much money, but come up and help us out if you want." So I said, "Yeah, I'll go up as a kind of runner."
Mm-hmm.
I took redundancy, so I had a sort of month's cash in my pocket.
Yeah.
And went and did this for the summer, and it was crazy. I went up to Scotland, and it was this kind of kids TV show where they were staying on a what's it called, like an outdoor activity centre, really, but we were surrounded by botanical gardens, so it's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
In a little village called Dunoon. And we streamed the entire show from there, live 24 hours a day. And we set up little webcams and microphones, and then used to do web chats and things like that. And it was, back then was kind of the first, or the second, if you like. Big Brother was really the first. And quite quickly, this sort of small cable channel had done this sort of quite innovative digital support to this sort of reality show, if you like. And the kids had to go through challenges and do certain things and eat like bad foods and things. It was an amalgamation of Big Brother and I'm a Celebrity and all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
But really the innovation was in the fact that we were streaming, we were bouncing this internet stream off a satellite and back to London. And I started filming with the contestants and doing some stuff outside of the TV crew, which eventually broke out into a second show on the television show. So there were things that I was doing and able to do because I was in the digital team and there was just two of us.
Yeah.
That was having a huge impact across the entire show. Here I was in the first TV show I'd ever been a part of. Mm-hmm. And, some of the tapes I'd shot made them put on a late night show for the for Trouble. And this was like quite a new thing. Mm-hmm. And I think the reason I sort of say that is because, this was also very key, is that if you worked in the sort of technical or digital side of content and TV, then there weren't many people in that area. It was quite a new sort of burgeoning area. So you weren't competing with many people. And actually to have a small amount of knowledge in that space meant that you had a huge amount of knowledge because you were sort of that much more advanced than anyone else, even though you were only 2 months into it yourself. So and what was happening in the TV industry was that, of course, it was becoming saturated. Mm-hmm. There were people piling into that industry, desperately trying to get experience in a very old-fashioned hierarchical space.
Yeah. So
you had hundreds of runners all competing for those jobs, and that's why diversity in that area is low because of course it favors those who can afford to not live on very much money.
Yeah.
To be able to stay in the industry long enough.
Right.
So, you probably, if you were poor, you only did a few jobs as a runner before you were like, sod this for a laugh.
Yeah.
I have to pay my bills.
Yeah. So do you think that's a symptom, or, that's symptomatic of the industry where, as you say, if you've got perhaps some money set aside, or if you're fortunate enough to come from a slightly wealthier family, that you can perhaps fall back on those whilst you're getting paid peanuts, so you can keep your dream alive to keep working through the industry.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely the reason why TV's so white and middle class. Mm-hmm. That's it. I mean, most of the TV decisions and bigger jobs were coming out of London. Mm-hmm. In order to live in London on £50 a day. Yeah. After you pay your tax, it was, I was taking home like £42 a day. Right. On that job. Yeah. I think. So,
big 42 pounds.
Exactly. Yeah. And after you paid your travel card, that doesn't leave you much money.
£5.50. That's enough.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's a problem, and they're trying to address it. It's a difficult one to kind of. So it takes a generation to kind of get past.
So it's still quite symptomatic of today as well. So it wasn't just from the time when you were being a runner in,
Oh,
in
no,
sort
no.
of that digital age, well, sort of the coming on
Yeah,
of the digital age. So it's still quite apparent today as well.
definitely. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I think, like, the reason I point this out mainly in my story is
Mm-hmm.
that, not the, it's kind of, I realized that I needed to act quickly, basically.
Yeah.
Like, I couldn't, this was not an industry or anything I could mess around with. I didn't have the funds and the capital to do that.
Mm-hmm. So did
So
you
I
find
needed to
yourself?
move quickly.
So did you find yourself taking more chances than perhaps if you were, in an office job or in a sort of, let's say, probably a sort of a more level playing field industry where it may have not mattered so much because, as you say, you only had literally a certain amount of cash flow to last you, so you were making decisions faster, taking chances more so than anywhere else.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I think that I am built like that anyway.
Okay.
And I think I had a point to prove. And,
Mm-hmm.
that was me itching to get out to work. And
Yeah.
I think, to be honest, wherever I would have been, I would have applied that kind of passion and haste. I
Mm-hmm.
was eager to become like an adult and sort of be out there sort of doing something interesting. And I think that the thing, the thing was I had fallen into, through no real planning of my own, what I would now say is a space in time and that industry that really kind of welcomed that. Like there was an opportunity to do that. If it had been in some other jobs, in an office job, I could have been throwing all that stuff at the wall, but like just being blocked by bureaucracy or hierarchy
Mm-hmm.
or all sorts of other things. But in actual fact, I was handed an industry which was had no skills, no people with skilled up. So there was a huge demand for people to kind of jump the ranks quickly, and no real competition. So all you needed was that in, and I was lucky enough to have that in. And I do sort of, place a lot of that luck on those kind of events all occurring at the same time, that it kind of propelled me into that space. And suddenly, actually, very quickly, you sort of become an expert in something.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of, you can, I fully understand, I really kind of value like what I would call proper jobs, like doctors and lawyers and stuff like that, because there's no quick route through that. You have to train, you have to do the years and everything.
Yeah, and you can't, and I guess you can't really blag your way to being a doctor, right? You can't really sort of
exactly.
I think it's this, I looked it up on WebMD.
Or make use of a kind of a shift. It's like in those there's such sort of institutional jobs and worlds that they've been up and running for so long. They've got tradition, they've got rules, there's ways to do things.
Yeah, absolutely.
And here was this new industry that just kind of no one had even like figured out yet.
Yeah.
So there were no rules. There was no sort of like, oh, you have to do this before you do that, or you can't just become, something or other over here. It was all sort of wide open. So it allowed someone who was passionate and excited about innovation, and who was maybe actually, and this is something that's quite a big thing for me. I think actually it sort of ties into this point. Maybe a little bit lazy, actually. I mean, like, it's something that Bill Gates, I've subsequently seen, like Bill Gates used to always say, which is that it sort of benefits you to be a little bit lazy because it forces you to find better ways of doing things,
right?
More efficient ways of doing things.
Yeah.
And the idea of going into those traditional jobs just felt like too much of a hard slog to be then just at the same level as loads of other people. I wasn't interested in that. I want to make a big impact now and quickly. And like it's more, I want to do it more efficiently than that. And I think that my slight sort of laziness has always kept me innovating, because it's like, find a quicker way. How can I leave later? How
can I condense all this down into a smaller time? Yeah.
Exactly. So I think like that's my eternal journey, is that I'm always trying to sort of make every process a bit better.
Right.
Which actually, goes right back to the computer programming, which is like, that's what you're trying to do when you're programming. Because you can program really badly and loosely, and it's sort of a bit messy, but it still works.
Yeah.
Or you can like really, really like reduce that code down, and it's more efficient and cleaner, basically. And I guess that I'm always trying to do that in everything we do. Find a new way of doing it, a new process, and make everyone's lives easier. So
Great.
you can do more for less.
Sounds
Or take a break.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It'll just
Most
automate
importantly.
in the background. Yeah.
Yeah.
So just coming back to your story, it's what's interesting is that I noted this down that you said, I'm naturally built for haste, speed, to push,
Yeah.
for efficiency, to be lazy. But yet you were, taking chances because you, whether or not you knew it at the time, this sort of industry was so new and fluid that it allowed for that. Where did
That's
you
right.
go? Where did you go after sort of, basically picking up a camera and going, right, I'm now a cameraman for this digital element of this show?
Yeah. It's a good question. So there's a little bit of that story that just ends and kind of goes off on a tangent slightly as well, but I have to tell it just because
Yeah, absolutely.
while I was up there, this job was only for a month, and of course I needed to find some work when I got back. And then you find out immediately that TV jobs are very sporadic. It's not this kind of constant work that comes.
Yeah.
And actually, to get a job for a month is quite long in TV, or it certainly was back then. Quite often it might be shorter periods. But anyway, whilst that was happening, I renegotiated my return back to the auction website. So they'd made me redundant. I'd taken voluntary redundancy from my first job outside of uni.
Yeah.
I got being made redundant from, and then I was negotiating going back, and so I negotiated to go back the moment I arrived back in London in September, and I got something like a $4,000 pay rise.
Nice.
So yeah, suddenly I was learning some more stuff about how to like do this sort of thing, and actually it's one of these things now that like when people come to me and they say, oh, I think I'm going to get made redundant. And they're really upset and they're really sad. They take it really personally, of course.
Yeah.
And of course, my brain just always flicks back. And for me, redundancy is like a good thing.
Yeah.
Because the first time I was made redundant, I went back a month later and I was on the pay rise. So, for me, it doesn't resonate like it's a bad thing. It's an opportunity.
Right. And I was going to ask about that, but you pretty much kind of summed it up, which was, you're right. People that do suffer from redundancy, and it is more apparent in this day and age than ever before. But it sounds to me like, first off, you were pretty fortunate, and it's quite ludicrous that the company were like, "Oh crap, we've given him voluntary redundancy.
Yeah.
now we want him back." So I guess when you before that, and I don't want to dwell on it too much, but effectively, you saw when they said, right, you're going to be made redundant, you can accept voluntary redundancy. Was that when you were in that place, when you didn't know what was coming next, did you still feel, right, you know what, this is an opportunity for me to go? Right.
Yeah, I did, and a lot of it was because it was only my first job out of uni, so I still felt like I was trading on borrowed time, and the fact that I'd got a job anyway already was already enough.
Yeah,
and it was only 7 months in or something, so it didn't feel like, and it was the internet, it was the .com bubble, and you've been reading about it, and there was a slight excitement of that.
Yeah, well. You're like, yay! I've been affected by the .com bubble. Yay.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not immune to this.
Yeah, you became part of the story, right? Because you were reading about it in the paper every day, and like you were inside one as it was imploding. It was quite funny.
Telling your friends, guess what? I'm part of the bubble. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We have fresh fruit delivered every day, but we're going to go out of business. It's fine. That was the way it worked.
Brilliant. Yeah, just blowing. Ruining your bottom line.
So the thing was, I went back there, and it was September, and basically this Canadian company come in and bought us, and they'd said that they want to grow the company, and the guy had come over from Canada, the CEO, and this is the first time I sat there and been addressed by the CEO, and he was very businesslike, and he told us how important we were and all this sort of stuff. And then it kind of occurred over the sort of next few months that they were buying us because if they put X amount of cash in, it unlocked the next level of investment from the investors. However, once they'd done that, they then were happy to just shut the business down. Right. So between September and December, he basically lied and came in and told us how important we were and how amazing we were and how protected we were, and he was going to nurture us and we were really important to the future of the business.
Yeah.
And the deal transaction went through in mid-December, and he walked in and said, or he wasn't there by then, I think he did it over the phone, but basically said, that's it, shutting the whole office down like 1 week before Christmas. Which again, you know, like by the time I'd got there, I was just like, yeah, for lots of people this was quite a big deal, but for me, I felt like I was lucky to have gone back and it had plugged a gap and all those sorts of things. But yeah, it was pretty cold actually to do that to a whole team of people. And so I was made redundant twice from my first job. is my kind of life lesson from that.
Yeah, that's pretty well. But at the same time, you were still pretty kind of just generally optimistic that things were going to work out fine. And
I think so.
Right.
Yeah.
And is that because it's just generally naturally part of your nature to be like, all right, let me take a breath. This is a bit shit, but you know what? It's going to be great. It'll be fine.
Yeah, I think there's elements of that, definitely. And you know me well, that like, I think there's a few things that happened in my life that have reinforced this idea that what's the worst that could happen, basically. And actually embracing failure is one of those things.
Right.
And yeah, a lot of that came from my dad, because he said something very important to me when my parents were splitting up, and he said that, you know, it doesn't matter, out of everything bad that happens, something great always comes out there. You know, you just have to hold on, you know, it's like you learn something about yourself, or you see a different way, you know, way in the world that kind of you didn't see before. Yeah. So it opens something up for you. And that happened, you know, when I was like 14, 15, it was a really informative time. Yeah. And it is stuck with me. And I think that's the underlying sort of lesson that sticks with me, that actually whenever stuff like that starts to happen and unfold in front of me, rather than going into panic, I sort of slightly relish in it a little bit, because I know that something good's coming. I know that there's this like, this change, you know, and it's like, there will be some hardship and there's going to be some problems to solve. But problem solving isn't like, I don't fear that. But I'm excited about the opportunity. So yeah, redundancy, all that sort of stuff, staring into the abyss actually kind of gets me a bit like excited.
Well, I think that's a fantastic lesson for me to learn, because I must admit that it's that feeling of like, fuck, you know, it's always there around the corner. So there's definitely something to learn, that to try and I think even just generally people in general have that sort of feeling of trepidation and fear when things like that do come up, because for whatever reason there's a lot of kind of, you know, uncertainty. But yeah, you're right. You know, when it boils down to it, it's a case of there will be something that comes from this. After that sort of hardship, or even through that hardship, there'll be something that comes up that's actually really great.
Exactly. And I think that, you know, I'm at risk of undermining the whole anecdote, but, you know, there's a great quote in Jurassic Park, life finds a way.
Yeah.
You know?
Listen, that's the second podcast where we've mentioned Jurassic Park, so I'm happy with that. Yeah.
That's cool. It's a good reference. Yeah, life will find a way. Jeff Goldblum. Yeah. But it's true. It's like, I always say to people, you know, it's like, and not that this ever takes away any moment of dwelling in sadness and being unhappy and, you know, sort of mourning something. That's really important. But that we're really resilient. Like, you know, we've evolved all these like hundreds of thousands of years, and we used to go through a lot more worse stuff than this. You know? And we're still survived. So, you know, we're quite resilient human beings, and yeah, we should remember that in the face of pain and anger. Yeah,
that's a good lesson. I like it. All right, I like the fact that we've gone off on a tangent as well. That's good. But let's just try and bring it back
on track.
Yeah, so we've gone through two redundancies.
Setting
up of a web series.
So my story of how I got here is always front loaded. There's like, this part to me is like, all this part is very important.
Right.
The stuff afterwards, like, you know, because then it's a snowball, right? Like as soon as you're on that track, like everything just gets easier and easier. But These bits are like the most important parts.
Okay, and that's a really interesting point, and I don't want to deter you from sort of carrying on telling the story, but when you said, it's this bit, and then all of a sudden it's just snowballs and starts to go off on its own. Do you feel that that's because you without sounding too philosophical and sort of perhaps to some it may sound a bit woo-woo, but is that because you feel that you found your sort of true purpose and your true path once things started to snowball?
Yeah, definitely. I think that around that period I was felt really content, like I was fitting in, and I was like I had a job to solve, It was like I felt like I was in the right place.
Right.
But I would never say that I felt like it was like I found my purpose.
Okay.
And not through any kind of reason that it isn't my purpose, but more that I just felt like all these events that kind of led me down this path I loved and I was so grateful for.
Yeah.
But I kind of felt like it could have been just as much been any other path. And I wouldn't know whether I would have felt as grateful for any other path. I certainly felt as grateful, like super grateful for this one. And I don't really think about, is the grass greener? I just think about being happy to kind of be given these opportunities. So yeah, I do, I feel like I fell into that, but I try not to I try not to think too hard about how it happened.
Okay.
Like there are a series of events that brought me there, but I don't feel like I'm missing out on something else, or I could have done this a little bit different or better, or I'm sort of happy with my path. If that makes sense. But that also goes with my general, my general sort of outlook in life.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, so
So the important part is basically, no, it's all good. So the important part that after I was made redundant was that there was a girl that I used to work with at iCollector, and we were like job buddies, So in that kind of month leading up to final redundancy, we'd always get the job papers and go and have a coffee and like go through them together. And so every Monday it would be like the media jobs and the Guardian, and then eventually you sort of go home, and Christmas came and everyone sort of, that was it at the end of our time there. But occasionally, you'd sort of get a text from your old colleagues going, "Oh, have you seen this job in this paper?" or something like that. And there was one week where I was back at my typesetting company doing part-time work, back from when I was like 15. And I didn't buy the paper. I didn't buy the Guardian that Monday. I'd just given up. I was like, sod it, can't be asked. Sometimes you just forget it and you just missed it. And, why am I bothering anyway, sort of thing. And my colleague from iCollector, she texted me and she said, "Oh, have you seen the thing today?" I was like, "No, I didn't buy it. Couldn't be bothered." And she said, "Oh, there's a job in there that I think you should go for." I was like, "Okay, cool." And she texted me through the details. And this was like back in grey text, green screens on your phone, when you had like certain lines of text and you had to like scroll down if someone said more than 2 words.
And it was like probably like 50p per text.
Yeah, exactly.
You probably still owe her like £1.50 at least.
Yeah, exactly. She'd retype the whole job advert.
Oh my goodness, really?
Yeah, and sort of like and put the different jobs, and basically it was an advert for people applying for jobs on Big Brother.
Oh.
And obviously I'd done this reality show and
course.
had tried to get into that space before. And Big Brother was like the big one. It was Big Brother 3 that was coming up. So it was just as it was like starting to really explode.
Yeah.
And there were 3 jobs advertised on there. It was a video editor, a picture editor, and a production assistant, which was a kind of equivalent to a runner. Mm-hmm. And I think the video editors and the picture editors were £150 a day, which was a lot of money for me. I was looking at going like, wow, I was kind of more used to £50 a day. Mm-hmm. And then there was a production assistant, which was, I think, £50 a day, or £60 it might have been back then. And I thought, look, I've been scanning this artwork. I've been using Photoshop 6 years now. I've got like basically nearly a degree in this subject. But I kind of knew from the way the job advert was written that if I went for the picture or the video editor, that they wouldn't give it to me, because I figured that they would need more experience. And the way the job advert was written was that they were looking to build like a news team that was writing for the show. So it was to go on the website. And they were building it more like a news team rather than a content team, if that makes sense. And I didn't have any news experience. I had zero, kind of newsroom or any journalistic experience whatsoever. So I figured if I apply for the video picture job, then I'll never get it. And that's it. So if I go for the production assistant job, I know I can do it. You know, with the experience I've got, putting myself in their position. Here's a kid who's worked across a reality show where they've done live streaming, web chats, and general internet stuff. Like there's probably not many people who've had that experience, and particularly for that role. So I went for it, and I got it. I got the production assistant job, and that really was the start of a whole new sort of phase in my life. And again, that kind of decision of going for the right job was really important, and I think back to that quite a lot. It informed it quite a bit. So yeah, and I started on Big Brother 3, and it was, it's quite a sort of big day. I remember very much going into the Elstree Film Studios, and for me it was very much like a big moment walking down that lot. And it's where you're going to work in the George Lucas stage, because that's where they filmed Star Wars, and suddenly you're seeing this big Brother house and everything. And I'd been down to the Big Brother set before as an audience member, but turning up as that being a job was really quite new and fresh. And it was really important to me, actually. So and I thought to myself that from a work point of view, I know as soon as I can get in somewhere that I can make myself useful. And this, to me, is one of the pieces of advice I give to everybody, is make yourself indispensable, basically. That's your job when you go into a job. And then you never have to worry about getting made redundant, or if you do, they'll want you back because you're indispensable, And that was my job when I went into Big Brother. I went in as the lowest paid member of the web team. There were 3 teams of 10 people that worked shifts over 24 hours. So I was one of 3 production assistants, and then I was one of sort of 35 odd people in the production team just for the website. And then you're on set with a TV crew of like 200-300 people sometimes when they had the eviction nights. So you're sort of the lowest person in this like myriad of people all fighting for those jobs, basically. And particularly within the web team, there was a lot of people from different industries, journalists and things like that, who had never really worked in TV before. And so for them, it was quite exciting. They were getting paid fairly well. The job ran for 4 months, so for those, it was quite a long contract to get in those days on a TV show.
Yep.
So it's quite a valuable sort of position. And then it was sparked the kind of, from that moment on, from Big Brother 3, Endemol, the company who made it, plus many others, but mainly them, kind of went on a raft of reality shows that kind of spun out after that. Fame Academy, Salon, The Games, and it was kind of non-stop after that. There was a big sort of wave in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
And, the opportunity was, if you were good on that team, then you got moved on to the next show. And every show was slightly different, and Big Brother was the biggest. So Big Brother had 35 people on the web team, but then every other show might have only had 10 or 15 or 20. So, of course, there was this inevitable point where people would, you'd sort of fight for the job on the next show. And basically I went in there and I helped them do something technical with their setup, which is probably a bit boring to go into detail for this chat, but only to say that they were using a setup that recorded, allowed them to kind of rewind time so that they could go and make a video of something that just happened in the house. So you see someone have an argument, the video editor would go and rewind the tape, if you like, and then they'd make a video of that and they'd put it up on the website. And this technology they were using just wasn't of good enough quality. I was like, this is the gold standard of TV shows, but you're repurposing a piece of tape that is recorded at a lower quality than you should be, and therefore the video content was going out at very low quality. And I'd just come off this like teen show, you know, up in Scotland, and we were doing things better. We were using better quality and stuff. So I worked with them to try and devise a way of making that better. I found some consumer technology that was affordable, that we could actually purchase, and it recorded in HD. And suddenly, you know, everything like sort of stepped up, and it was just when that progression was happening as well in technology.
Yeah.
And then, you know, because I helped them build it and plan it, I was the only one who knew how to set it up and use it. So the next job I went on to, I think we went straight onto Fame Academy. Yeah. And I was still a production assistant then. And that's when I started building the tech. And they were going to start to run Celebrity Big Brother. Yeah. And that was going to run during Fame Academy. So they had this problem where they had most of the team on Fame Academy, but they had this kind of 2-week job, and they needed specialists to go in and make it work. Yeah. So they seconded me out of Fame Academy and put me in as a picture and video editor, and to build all the set and stuff on Celebrity Big Brother. So suddenly, within 2 roles, I jumped into that sort of £150 job, you know. So I tripled my salary, and I leapfrogged about like 35 people, basically, just because, you know, I was the only one who knew how to use all the stuff, you know. And I realized that it was like, you know, I made myself indispensable.
Yeah, it's a bit like Seth Godin talks about being a linchpin, and that's effectively which you've done, right? In this
same thing
scenario, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and then that was, you know, and then it sort of propelled after that. And obviously there were more and more shows, and I started to work my way in going in-house until we got to one show that was the Salon, and they did something very unique, which was a deal with a mobile operator to actually cut some of the clips and distribute them on the mobile platform like Orange and stuff like that. And I was the only person in charge of that. And it was from that point that they started to bring me in-house into Endemol. And that also in TV and media was a huge jump. Yeah. There's a whole raft of people who are freelancers in those industries, and there'll always be sort of freelancers. Yep. Cameramen, sound men, you know, sort of production people. If you like. And then there's a whole sort of world of the business of TV and media. And those are sort of few and far between, but they're more sort of staff roles. And but in general, production companies and media are sort of risk adverse, so they only hire people when they're being paid to do a job. And in all that sort of development time in between is, you know, you want to keep as nimble and thin and slim as possible, so you're not sort of burning too much cash. Yeah. So actually, those sort of full-time roles and office roles and in-house roles are even harder to get through. Yeah. And get into. So I'd sort of broken through undercover, if you like. And I'd sort of worked my way in, but not through any sort of the major strategy at the time. And now I look back and go, oh, this is how it happened. Yeah. But it's not like I was like majorly thinking of that at the time. No. I was more just like, I really enjoy this and I really want to do more of it. And I really I want to solve problems, and it seems to be working. So, yeah.
Wow. And so literally it comes from that place again, doesn't it? Where, you know, you see an opportunity, but as you say, it's not part of this master plan. It wasn't like I'm going to do this and then I'm going to do this. It was more a case of just coming from that place of like, I'm generally interested in this. I generally want to work out how to solve these problems or create a solution, or, you know, just improve things. And it comes back down to this efficiency and / laziness to make
exactly
right.
So but also it was that there was a. Oh, sorry, go.
No. I was just going to say, is it almost this through line through your career so far?
Yeah, definitely. And look, you know, there's probably another bit to this which I haven't gone into too much, but it sort of feeds into the same element, which is that the technology angle of it was really important. And you know, it cost me money and time, but I mainly did it because it was the thing I wanted to do. Right. But I was always trying to keep on top of, you know, latest developments in that area. Yeah. And particularly as internet opened up and social media, it was, you know, it's not like you have to wait years for a discovery. It was like every week there were new things happening. Yeah. And therefore, you know, new ways of conceiving how to do something. And, you know, that's how I managed to kind of impress them originally, by sort of developing a new way of them capturing this video and stuff. It wasn't really rocket science at all. It was just because I was sort of young enough and hungry enough that I was spending most of my time researching and experimenting with that stuff.
Yeah.
And now I realize as I've got older, you know, I don't have as much time to do that. And I rely on the younger people in my team now to be delivering that kind of ingenuity.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was that person in that time, and I managed to make myself useful in that area. But it cost me, you know, I had to invest in it. And I always had the latest mobile phone, not that I could afford it. But again, because I was excited and interested by that world, but it meant that I was one of the first people putting video on that phone. And I could stand there in front of my boss and go, look, this is really cool. There's video on my mobile phone. And then that's why he employed me to run, you know, that new mobile wing, delivering video to Orange and T-Mobile, and because he knew I could do it, and he knew I had a passion for it, and I was excited by it. But I had to invest in that up front. You know, that was my investment, which of course people at the time looked at as like, that's a luxury that you're buying the latest mobile phone and you can't afford it. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, but it's, you know, part of my job. It's part of my industry. And it's part of helping me get that leg up. And in a world where, you know, diversity isn't as rife, and I don't have the cash to kind of support myself through an endless kind of initiation process, I needed to accelerate myself. And those are the ways I chose to do it.
Cool. So let's look, we've probably got about 10-15 minutes left.
Sure.
I just want to fast forward a little. No, look, it's so interesting, and I think
good, yeah.
people will listen in and be interested. And you know,
Cool.
generally, anytime we do talk, I'm always inspired by your energy. But let's sort of. So I know that you were with Endemol for a time, and you kind of grew things to a point where you were like, right, I've done what I want to do. From where you are today, just tell us a little bit about what you're doing today, and kind of how that connects to that.
Cool. So I'll do the fast forward through that time. So that was 2003. I was at Endemol, Big Brother 3. I spent sort of 8 years there or something on like freelance and then full time. I set up their digital studio for them internally, which again, you know, was a sort of brand new thing. We started making original content online. So previous to that, it had always been support for TV shows. And then suddenly there was this concept that actually you could make original content like you do for a TV, but you make it for a website. Specifically can only be viewed on that site. And that was a long time ahead of things like Netflix coming out. And then you had all the streaming services and stuff like that. The fast forward to sort of 2010, I left Endemol for all sorts of reasons. I'd been there a long time. People who'd say to me, how could you stay in a company that long? Especially when you're kind of into innovation. But I felt like for 6 or 7 years of that time, it was a different job every 6 months. And I didn't wake up ever on a Monday not wanting to go to work. And then right near the end of that time, I started waking up on a Monday not wanting to go to work. And that is when you know that you need to leave. So if anyone ever asks you, you know, when's the right time, if you wake up and you can't bear the thought of it, then you need to start thinking about what you're going to do. And so I kind of planned my exit out of that company. And I went freelance, and I worked with a business partner of mine. We tried to set up our own business in the kind of production area, making TV shows, but kind of digital TV shows and online content, things like that. That didn't work just for a number of sort of external reasons. We moved to Scotland and all sorts of different stuff like that. And then I kind of just went and did some freelancing, really, because I thought I'd get out there in the big wide world. And I'd spent a long time in one company, and I wanted to kind of diversify out of TV and look at tech a little bit more again, and gaming as well. I was very interested in, and we met a lot of those companies before, and that was good fun. And I built my sort of contact base up again, and I went to work for the government, as you know, a little bit as well. I did a year or so with the government, helping them grow their tech sector in London. And I sort of went as a content specialist to help tell those stories. And then, fast forwarding really to the last couple of years, I kind of went back into what is now a sort of a healthier original content market for people in the media industry. So when we were doing it sort of 10, 15 years ago, it was really just quite innovation time, and there was sort of a few people dabbling in that space. But now you've got Netflix, Amazon, and all these sort of new players, and there's a really healthy sort of commissioning market for original content on digital platforms, and they're at sort of TV style budgets now as well. So that was always the other thing, is the budgets didn't quite follow the numbers of people viewing online, but now they're starting to happen. So yeah, and fast forward to now, I'm with a company called Gunpowder and Sky. They are 3 years old, funded through Otter Media, which is a sort of consortium of AT&T and Peter Chernin in the US, and run by 2 guys. One of them I used to work with, a guy called Floris Bauer, who was head of mergers and acquisitions at Endemol, and a guy called Van Toffler, who used to run Viacom for sort of over 30 years, or was in there for over 30 years. And yeah, they're building a new studio. And it was one of the things that we talked about at the end of our time at Endemol, which was, seeing all the frustrations of a legacy business trying to adapt into a digital world, and trying to sort of move the oil tanker of tradition, and finding that difficult. And we always talked about, what if you could build a content studio from the ground up today that didn't have those legacy issues and could kind of break through some of those barriers a bit quicker. And that's what Gunpowder and Sky is really. It's about creating stories from 90 seconds to 90 minutes. So we do short form series and feature films, and sort of not worrying too much about specializing in an area, but rather thinking about the audience and thinking about the story. So how do you tell this story in the best possible way, and how do you reach this audience in the best possible way? So rather than thinking, let's make a TV show or let's make a feature film, we think about those things first. And we're sort of platform agnostic, I suppose. We take that content, take those deals, and take that audience wherever they need to go, basically.
So it's
That makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it's quite innovative in the sense that you're thinking about the audience before you even make content, as opposed to just making content and then going, right, I need to find an audience.
That's it. Yeah, exactly. And I think, it's like a lot of these kind of in the creative sphere spaces, mm-hmm. There's a lot of people who specialize in an area. I make television shows, I make feature films, or I do a particular job within that industry. And I think that then there's other people who are sort of more general creatives who are trying to connect stories to audiences. And actually you can sort of think slightly outside of those realms and outside of those barriers. And that's the kind of company we're building, really. And that's the kind of people we need in this business, is the ones who are not locked down to a particular format or sort of structure of doing things. So yeah, very innovative, and an interesting playground to be in. Great opportunity to kind of do some exciting things and do things that people haven't done before, and do some things that will fail, but like learn from them, And I think that's the one bit that I guess I've sort of touched on across this, but haven't really formalized is that not being afraid to fail has to be one of my big time tips. Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Yeah. And just on that, so a lot of people do talk about kind of not being afraid to fail. How do you embrace that? So the element of risk taking around that, and then just being okay to make something, and then if it fails, you're like, all right, it failed.
Yeah, I think it's about accepting that there's multiple reasons as to why anything happens.
Right.
So you can a failure, you could easily, I don't think some people do this, easily spin it as completely one reason, which might be their own. It might be I caused this to fail, mm-hmm. or I did one thing wrong and that didn't mm-hmm. work. But I think if you really look at it, there's multiple reasons why something doesn't happen. And if you look at, we use this example a lot in content, and something going viral, for example, people always for years sort of say, well, how do I make this go viral? you know, and of course, as if it was a tag that you could put on a piece of content.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, well, it's good enough. I know it's good enough already. I just need to like tag it with that viral thing.
Yeah.
And of course, it just doesn't work like that. And it's like
hashtag viral. There we go. I've done it. It's out there. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, that's when people started to realize that it wasn't good enough just to make something that's good. And it is good to make something that's just good. And sometimes that doesn't get seen by as many people as you want it to get seen by.
Yeah.
But the fact that you made it just great is brilliant, and you can be proud of that. But we're probably more in our industry, we're in a world where, you know, you need eyeballs to make something really exciting and really good and really successful. It's not enough for it to just be of good quality. So, you know, someone will turn up with a piece of content and say, make this go viral. You can't do that. You know, there's a combination of things that needs to happen. Some of those things are outside of your control. So, you know, just topicality of what's going on in the world at the moment, timing, all sorts of different things that need to happen to make the piece of content go viral. And so, yeah, we're always having to think about those things, and it's about mitigating as many of those problems as possible. Yeah. So when I sort of do something in this space, I know that the story's good, or I know that the quality's good, and all those sorts of things that I can be proud of, regardless of what happens later. But if it's a failure, then I'm learning about the timing of something, or maybe I shouldn't have plugged it into that partner at that point, or maybe we needed to do those three things at exactly the same time rather than 2 weeks apart or whatever. So it's a combination of things, and that's the way I think, you know, the whole of people should look at these things. Is failure is not one simple part. You know, you can't blame one simple part, least of all yourself. And the best you can do is to sit up from whining about it and start to look at the things you can learn from it. And then it's not a failure. That's it. Like, you know. Yeah. And there's a big thing in America where people say, like, you know, they only hire CEOs who've gone bankrupt because they say that, you know, they're never going to do it again, or at least they have some experience of what went wrong. Whereas the guy who's never gone bankrupt is always a risk, right? Because he doesn't know the fit, he doesn't know the pain of that, and the importance of that.
So you don't have that skill set. You don't know the telltale signs. You can't. Exactly. Right.
And you're not afraid of it, importantly.
True. Yeah.
You know, you haven't learned that lesson and go, right, I'm never going to do that again. You know.
Yeah. I choose not to do that this time.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and I think that's true across all of your life. You know, you can use that skill across your entire life, relationships and all sorts of stuff.
Very profound to come to the end of our fantastic chat. It could go on for another half an hour. No. I have one final question, which is kind of becoming one of the sort of the top and the tail of these shows, which is, what would you like your legacy to be?
That's a really good point. Really good question. What would I like my legacy to be? I guess I still am very it's quite important to me to have a legacy, I think. I want to do something big that sort of shifts the way that people engage, interact, I don't know, or entertained, whatever it is. I do definitely want to do that. Yeah. I don't know what I want it to be. But I do, outside of my sort of direct industry, I do sort of think that probably the most important thing that we should be thinking about is how to extend human life. Right. Because I just sort of think that, you know, we're building so many great things that can be remembered and stored and all that sort of stuff, that it's a shame really that we can't experience it for longer. Right. And all that knowledge that does get lost, you know, I think even in today's age, I mean, in the old days, it used to be that only 20% of all knowledge was written down. Yeah. And the rest of it was handed down. But even in today's age, I think that's still quite low. But, you know, if people can live longer, I think we can do more. Because that failure, that learning through failure, it ends when you die, you know, and it restarts again. So I think that's why we get this cycle of sort of people repeating stuff. Yeah. And I think that, you know, if we should concentrate on making people live longer, and then we should get off the rock, the rock called Earth. Because I think those are the two most important things to me that need solving. And if I can play a role in that somehow, whether that's through telling a story or inspiring someone through a film or whatever it is. You know, I think I'm interested in sci-fi and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, you know, if I can help inspire someone who helps go on to solve those problems, then that would be like a great legacy to have, even if it was just one that I knew about.
Yeah, well, exactly, absolutely. That's pretty mind blowing.
Is that a good answer?
Listen, I'm not giving you validation.
You know, I need it.
Yeah,
I'm a creative.
yeah, I can feel it coming through the screen. Yeah, look, it's a fantastic answer. I mean, it doesn't touch any of the other answers. They're all very different. And that's what I love about the show, is that people come with their stories and then they tell me these things and I get to listen, and you know, the listeners will be able to listen to these stories and be inspired and you know, awesome. feel like they get to know this person. And look, that final closer is a real kind of, you know, one that sort of brings up different answers from everybody, and that's what I love about it. It's, some people find it struggle, some people just know, and that's what's beautiful about it. I just want to give people listening, when this goes out, an opportunity to find out where you are on the World Wide Web. So how would people best get in contact with you or connect to you?
Yeah, best on Twitter, Chucky Pasha, PASA, or on Instagram, and Pasha Rocks, PASAROCKS. The other thing that, of course, we didn't really have time to touch on, but is really important to me, and I should just flag here, is that you should go and check out Bright Vibes as well, which you'll understand from this conversation now if you go and check it out on Facebook. It's a site called Bright Vibes. It's all about positive news, and it's all about trying to inspire people for that next generation. So and that's kind of the manifestation of a lot of this learnings that I've got. So yeah, check it out, and that's where you can find me as well, so running that.
Awesome, fantastic. In your downtime when you're not doing everything else.
Exactly.
Cool, brilliant. Listen, Pasha, It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time today.
Cheers, Nick. Thanks a lot. Take it easy. Bye-bye. Cheers.
I hope you enjoyed listening to episode number 5, and it served to entertain, inform, and maybe even educate. I would love for you to become a regular listener. It's free to do so. You can connect with me via the usual channels: Instagram, Facebook, and email. Reach out and let me know who you would like me to interview. Maybe you know someone who's doing interesting things and the world needs to hear about them. Maybe it's even you. Or a question you would like me to ask one of our guests. The next episode is in 2 weeks, and until then, keep being you.